Musical theatre and railways are not a pairing many think of. Usually if a train is featured, it's usually a prop and not the central focus. However, there is one show that gives the railway a massive spotlight, and it's not what you would expect from a West End show. The story starts about 10 years before the show was even thought of. The year was 1974, and Audrey's books are flying off the shelves. But the world was changing, and with more and more people having access to technology such as TVs in their homes, the TV companies were more than keen to get as much on the small screen as possible. Audrey, though, was not convinced. The BBC had approached him in 1953, and following a disastrous pilot episode where Henry derailed and a hand was seen putting the stricken engine back on the track, it had infuriated the Reverend, and he wasn't shy with his feedback. In the meantime, a young, talented composer called Andrew Lloyd Webber was also keen to throw in his services to get the railway series to the masses on screen, and he wasn't short of talent. Andrew Lloyd Webber was born into show business. His parents surrounded him with music from an early age, and he started composing and had written many pieces before the age of 10. He would often be taken by his aunt, who was an actress, to her shows, where he quickly picked up the basics of the theatre. Andrew loved the theatre, and soon it became his whole world, and would often put on productions in a little miniature toy stage that his aunt had built him. But there was one thing from his childhood that really inspired him. That was the railway series. The books were first published 3 years before Andrew was born, and he loved the world the books created. But he, like others, were disappointed that a TV series was off the cards. Andrew at this point had several large musicals and was becoming a household name. Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and Jesus Christ Superstar were becoming sensations, and people loved the modern songs and unusual styles. It was edgy, fun, and very different to other shows. Andrew Lloyd Webber wanted to take his magic and apply it to the railway series. At the time, he was under the stress of creating Evita, and thought that working on a heartwarming and uplifting show such as Thomas the Tank Engine would help balance the dark tones from the West End. He approached Audrey with a proposal to help produce the railway series as a 2D cartoon-style show. Audrey agreed in principle, but was still wary. Taking inspiration from other shows of the time, the show would be shot in a similar version to Ivor the Engine, using backgrounds and cutout engines where they would move under stop motion. Andrew contacted TV specialist writer and actor Peter Reeves to help with any contributing lyrics, and asked Brian Cosgrove to help commission a pilot episode. In 1976, all was ready and the pilot was put to Granada Studios. But Granada turned the project down, citing popularity concerns with the show outside of the UK. Andrew sadly pulled out at the same time, as he was not given as much creative flexibility from Audrey as he needed. The pilot has been lost to the great vaults of time and has never been shown to the public. The only evidence of the pilot are these scenes. Around the same time, Andrew was invited to help compose songs for a new type of animated version of Cinderella. An American TV company wanted to personify trains. The idea that the role of Cinderella would be played by a steam engine, with an electric and a diesel engine as the stepsisters. The prince would be a human and would hold a grand competition for all engines to pull the royal train. The idea was a little out there, but it did prove that there was an interest in the idea of using trains as a possible medium for telling stories. Andrew simply couldn't let the idea go. He had written a song called Engine of Love, and in 1981, after seeing his son's face fill with wonder at the sight of a steam train, he felt the time was right to dust off the song and his old notes and take the ideas seriously. In less than a year, he and Richard Stilgoe was ready to show some of the early material at the Sydmonton Festival. Andrew had intended the show to have similar tones to Joseph and involve children in a choir-like style feature, but director Trevor Dunn had some thoughts. It was a great show, but in the 80s age, it was too delicate and cute. It wasn't edgy enough, and he felt that the show needed to give the children something that they had never seen before. It needed competition, it needed spectacle, it needed movement. Andrew took the feedback to heart, quite literally. Andrew knew the perfect choreographer for the job and contacted Arlene Phillips. She had limited experience on roller skates, but had choreographed scenes for films on skates before. She took on the challenge, and for the next 6 weeks, both Arlene and Trevor worked with the new cast to teach them the moves, as well as give them an extensive course in skating. It wasn't long before everything was in full swing, with an opening date of March 1984. So what is the story of Starlight Express all about? I do go into depth here, so before anybody said anything, there is spoilers. The story centres around a young boy's train set. As the child plays, he is Control, but he falls asleep and dreams that the trains he is playing with come to life, and when they do, all they want to do is race. The champion of the track is a diesel engine called Greaseball. Greaseball and his cavalcade of diesels and freight trucks boast to all his status as king. As he does, another engine enters called Rusty. Rusty is a steam engine and obsolete compared to Greaseball. Greaseball mocks the older engine, but Rusty challenges him, stating he will win the championship. Control, however, orders Rusty to collect a passenger train from the yard. The train consists of Dinah, the dining car, Ashley, the smoking car, Buffy, the Buffy car, and Pearl, an observation car. After collecting the train, Control orders Rusty to collect a freight train. Meanwhile, Greaseball comes back with his freight train and boasts to the coaches, while the coaches and the freight trains argue about which is better, freight or passengers. Control then declares that the entries for the championship are open and ready to challenge Greaseball, and 6 engines come forward, including a bullet train and an advanced passenger train. But as the entries close, a 7th contender appears called Electra. Electra and his rake of 5 coaches boast that electric is the way of the future. While Control explains the rules, each train will compete in pairs, and each engine will pull 1 coach. There will be 3 heats, and the winner moves to the final, where they will compete for the fastest train. Rusty offers to race with Pearl, but Pearl rejects him. She wanted her dream train, but after an invite from Electra, Pearl adopts Electra as her partner. Rusty is left alone as the first heat starts. Greaseball and Dinah win, but Dinah accuses Greaseball of cheating. Greaseball leaves her behind, while Rusty, upset from being rejected, retreats to the freight yard, where an old steam engine called Papa is sat. Papa introduces Rusty to an old sleeping car called Memphis Belle, and Rusty agrees to race. They race, but Rusty and Memphis Belle finished last, with Electra and Pearl going through to the finals. After the defeat, Rusty retreats back to Poppy's yard and doubts himself. Papa decides to step up and race, but as Rusty points out, the slots for the 3rd heat are filled. Control then announces that the British train in the 3rd heat had been scrapped, leaving a final opening. Papa decides to take it, taking an old car called Dustin with him. Papa sees the opening as a sign from the Starlight Express, making him more determined for him to win. The race commences, and Papa does win, but in doing so he exhausts himself. He begs Rusty to take his place, but after seeing Pearl and Electra together, he relents and confirms he will race. His carriage will be Greaseball's brake van truck called CB. Meanwhile, the others debate whether it's fair to let Rusty race, and in the end, they do decide to let Rusty take a shot, while Control allows all the coaches to change partners. Greaseball ditches Dinah and Pearl ditches Electra to couple together. Dinah is distraught, but accepts an invite from Electra. In the meantime, CB tells Greaseball he will help him win the championship by sabotaging Rusty. He then tells Electra that he will help him win by wiping out Greaseball. We get to the final race, and in the final race, all goes to plan. CB sabotaged Rusty by making him unable to finish the race, and Electra and Greaseball finish in a tie. Control announces that there will be a final race between the diesel and the electric, but Rusty complains it wasn't fair, but it falls on deaf ears. Pearl confronts Greaseball, but Greaseball threatens her to silence. Rusty retreats back to the yard, where he pleads to the Starlight Express for help again. The Starlight appears, but it is Popper all streamlined. Popper tells him that he has all the power he needs, but modifies him with his own streamlining. Rusty seeks Dustin, and Dustin agrees to race with him in the final. Seconds before the final race, Dinah, who was sick of how Elektra treats her, disconnects from him. Elektra begs CB for help. All the trains gather, but at the last second, Rusty enters with Dustin. The marshals let him in, and the race is on. The race is fast and furious. Dustin and Rusty work together and use Dustin's weight to their advantage. Pearl, sick of Greaseball's antics, holds Greaseball back, and Elektra zaps energy at Greaseball. He misses and hits Pearl. Greaseball uncouples from Pearl at full speed, and Rusty pulls back to save her. Greaseball and Elektra start to fight over CB, but all three end up in a huge wreck, allowing Rusty to win. Instead of celebrating, Rusty runs off to find Pearl, while a humiliated Elektra leaves. The engines and the coaches reunite, and Rusty confesses his love for Pearl, but Greaseball announces the wreck has taken its toll on him, and he could never race again. But Popper offers to convert him to steam. Control tries to assert control and cancels Rusty's victory lap. The engines tell Control to shut it, and all the engines celebrate the new coming of steam. Yeah, it's a lot. The other thing that I have to say about this show is the costumes. The costumes are incredible and so within the new age of the 80s. The costumes also had function as well as form. The couplings were strong round handles attached to the actor's back, allowing for easy changeovers at speed. Elektra's costumes had wiring incorporated for additional lights, while the female cars had a flair of delicateness. The engine's costumes are physically larger and appear stronger, like the very real engines of the day. And then there's the set. This is not a show that can sit in an ordinary theatre. The set itself has been designed to sit around parts of the audience. As the races are happening, the trains race through the audience on a specially designed track and over a 150-foot, 6-ton bridge, which can be turned, tilted, lifted and moved around the set. The show debuted in 1984 and in Broadway in 1987, and people flocked to see it. Andrew wanted the show to evolve and change in line with new audiences, so he allowed the show to evolve and be updated with growing trends. Songs were added and removed, and scenes were altered to compete with the modern norms. In 1989, Starlight Express closed in America, but it was still going strong in the West End. And in 1992, the show was reinvented. 12 songs were removed, 5 were added, Belle and CB were cut, Rusty didn't race till the end, taking Popper's place, Buffy took CB place in the final, and Elektra and Greaseball crashed accidentally. Now this is the very version of the show I went to see in the West End in 1999. It was incredible. And I still remember going, and I have the songs downloaded, and I have to admit, it is my go-to album. In 2002, after 7,409 performances, Starlight closed in London. But it is huge in Germany. The show is so popular that a purpose-built theatre was built just for it, and the show has been seen by over 19 million people. The creative teams made their own revisions, including the removal of Belle, and at one point 3 versions of the show was running at the same time. In 2018, female engines were added, and some roles were cut to make the show more gender neutral. This had Andrew's blessing, including the revision of Papa to Mama. The show has toured all around the world and wowing audiences from as far away as Asia and Japan. On each leg of the tour, the set reflected the country that they were in, including regions of the show to reflect the country's culture. There was even a spin-off tour with the engines on ice. It failed to gain an audience though, as it closed as quickly as it opened. In 2023, over 20 years after the show was closed, Wembley Park Theatre has announced that Starlight Express is back with a new show, a new style, and a new plot twist. The tickets are on sale, and from what I've heard, it's gonna be epic. There is one thing I haven't spoken about yet, and it's this. You can say it sounds a little familiar, and yes, Andrews was inspired by it. The really useful group is Andrews Company, dedicated to the licensing, production and promotion of its shows, records and any publishing rights. The group is sub-splintered into theatres, films, records and auditoriums that the group owns. The group allows for Andrew to have sole control over his rights and with it approval of who has work and how it is presented. It sounds complicated, but in fact getting the rights is rather straightforward, and many of Andrew's shows have been performed in schools and local amateur theatres. For Starlight though, the only place to see the show is in a professional production. I'm already looking for tickets, and the ticket prices aren't badly priced considering, starting at $29.95. It's very reasonable for this calibre of show. I can't wait to see it, and not only will I get to relive my youth, but to watch a very different take on an incredible composer's love letter to the humble train. Merry Christmas all.